So the New York Times, just going to point this out. The New York Times' original obit of Qasem Soleimani, okay, said this: Qasem Soleimani, master of Iran's intrigue and force, dies at 62. 6 hours later, they posted this obituary. Sam Weish, who was the last coach to lead the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl, but who was later fined by the National Football League for barring a female reporter from the team's locker room, has died. So just to contrast the treatment, Sam Weish was a coach who barred a female reporter from the team's locker room. That's in his obit headline from the New York Times on Twitter. Qasem Soleimani, a master terrorist responsible for the deaths of literally tens of thousands of people around the Middle East, mostly Muslims. His headline is, Qasem Soleimani, master of Iran's intrigue and force, dies at 62. I mean, the New York Times is really going to bat for Soleimani. Really going to bat for Soleimani. They tweeted out this morning the sort of tagline for their latest episode of The Daily, which is their daily podcast on news. Here's what they tweeted out, quote, knowing General Soleimani was out there made me feel safer, said a student about the commander killed in an American drone strike. He was like a security umbrella above our country. Wow. Isn't that moving? Don't you feel better knowing that the New York Times is militating on behalf of one of the world's leading terrorists? Really, really nice stuff. And it isn't just that. They have an article by a person named Azadeh Moaveni today, a writer and analyst with the international crisis group called The Day After War Begins in Iran. The outpouring of grief for Qasem Soleimani is the country's first act of retaliation. And this piece is just pure propaganda. It's absolutely pure propaganda. She says, last week, an American drone strike incinerated Iran's top general and national war hero, Major General Qasem Soleimani, along with the senior Iraqi militia commander, in what can only be understood as an act of war. See, it wasn't an act of war when Soleimani, was like ordering strikes against Saudi oil facilities, or when he was attacking shipping in international shipping lanes, or when he was ordering militia to burn down the U.S. embassy and planning further attacks. None of that was an act of war. It was an act of war when that guy got killed. And all he was really was a national war hero, according to this columnist for the New York Times. It's just propaganda, pure propaganda. This columnist says, being here again makes me feel that I, an American citizen of Iranian origin, have been here so often before. The cycles of imminent war and upheaval Iranians seem destined to face every few years, cycles often driven by the whims of the United States and the increasing boldness of the whims of the United States? Who sits around thinking that Bush, Obama, Trump, by the way, Bush, Obama, and Trump all campaigned on the same promise not to get into war in the Middle East. All of them did. Right? Barack Obama said he was going to end our endless war. George W. Bush in 2000 campaigned on the notion that he was going to minimize America's military presence. So did Bill Clinton. This has been a consistent feature of American foreign policy since the end of the Cold War. And then reality intrudes, because it turns out that Iran is a giant terror state rogue regime. But according to this columnist, it's just the whims of the United States. Like, presidents get up one morning, they're like, those Iranians, I'm just going to nail them. Also, this idea that war and upheaval is just Iranians destined to face the war and upheaval. Why don't you look at the Iranian government as maybe the source of the problem? She says, this now feels like a civilizational inheritance, a legacy that my mother bore before me, her mother before her, that I will pass down to my children. Every Iranian's family's history is touched with this past in its own way. Okay, the sentences that mean nothing, but attempt to boil down opposition to a regime to opposition to Iranians personally, which is just absurd. You know how many Persians I know who are living in the city of Los Angeles and despise the regime in Iran? There's a reason that thousands and thousands of people over the years have fled Iran. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that The Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content.